Happy Canada Day, everyone. July 1st, and it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm just out doing my morning bird survey. And I've got some good news to report, which is nice on Canada Day. The Gypsy Moth impacts are lessening. Quite a few of the caterpillars are dying off. Quite a few are going into pupation. And those that are remaining seem to be eating at a less frenetic pace. Plus, as you can see here, a lot of the poplars are regrowing leaves. You can see the old stems here from the initial leaves, and now they're resprouting new leaves. These big tooth aspen are now re-leafing, so they look almost like early spring again. So that's really nice to see. Hopefully we will get over this semi-drought we've been having too, because that can also impact the recovery of these trees. The balsam poplar in our gravel pit are re-leafing. Now, it was something I expected that if these trees were going to re-leaf, the poplars would probably be the first ones to do so because they are such fast growers. But nice to see, because a lot of these were totally stripped off. You can see here quite a few caterpillars have gone into the pupal stage. Some are just aggregating, about to do so. As you can see here, this young white pine still has its new needles from this year, but virtually all of the previous needles from other years have been stripped off. Now I suspect this tree will at least survive into the next year, given that the caterpillar feeding has stopped now on it. I'm not sure what impact the removal of that many needles may have. These larger pine here were even more heavily stripped. You can see how thin they are. So I think their future is a little bit bleak, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe they can recover as long as they still have their outer needles, which these ones do have small amounts. This small spruce has been pretty heavily chewed up. And I don't know if you can see a lot of dead caterpillar carcasses here. So either that one of the virus or bacterial diseases is going through the population now, because these are all dead, all the ones that are hanging here. The branches have been chewed up pretty good. They still have a few needles, especially in the outer sections. Like, for example, this branch has the new needle growth. I don't know whether these ones will regrow. This is the more extreme defoliation of a white pine that's about 20 feet, 30 feet tall. And you can see they've taken virtually everything, even the new needles, they've stripped down. And again, caterpillars here that are just clinging to the trunk, and they're all dead. There's a few that have pupated, but most are dead. Still a few living ones. Whereas this little pine beside it survived fairly well for some reason. So the tamarack do seem to be able to recover to a degree after defoliation. Most of these inner needle clusters were chewed off, and now they seem to be resprouting. So that's very good news. I didn't want to lose the few larch that we have here, or tamarack, on the property. They're nice to have growing here. Just as an example of a white spruce that's been chewed up pretty good. The top is very thinned out, almost to no needles. Again here, you can probably see quite a few hanging dead caterpillars now. Still some living ones, but I think their activity has slowed down a lot. Another white pine about 30 feet tall that's been virtually stripped, except for the very top. A few needles remain, so I don't think this tree will probably survive, but maybe I'll be surprised and it will resprout needles on the lower section, but I don't think they do. One of the tree species we have that seems to have not been touched much by gypsy moth is white ash. We don't have a lot of them here, and some that we do have were hit by the emerald ash borer. Still have some that are healthy, and this one's very healthy. It's a young one. It's only been here about 8 or so years, I think. Same thing with a lot of our black locusts here, and cottonwood, which you can see here in the background. The caterpillars don't seem to eat those very much. Here's our large cottonwood, or one of them, that again does not seem to be a preferred food of the gypsy moth. It didn't seem to eat it at all, really. We have quite a few of these in the pit and scattered around other sections of the property, and none of them really have been majorly affected, just slightly chewed. I am very happy to report that our big oak out behind the house, which was totally defoliated, is now coming back into leaf. You can see here some of the new leaflets coming out, and they're just coming out all over the twigs, so that's a very good sign. I had fears this tree might have been done for the way it was totally defoliated, but you can see all the new leaves coming out. So hopefully, somehow, I want to try and prevent this tree from being so overrun next year. The trouble is, these moths lay the egg masses from the ground right up to the higher parts of the tree. So while I can clear the ground, the lower ones off, you can see some here, for example, from last year that are up at about 10 feet. Well, that's not so hard, but once they get up to 20 and 30 feet, it gets hard to get them down. This young sugar maple that's beside this white pine tree is one of the few maples I've seen that was totally defoliated. I think a part of that is because this white pine was heavily chewed upon as well. You can see it still has some of its crown, but the lower sections have been quite heavily chewed upon. It still has needles, so it might survive, but this maple was really defoliated. I assume it will grow back some leaves. In fact, I do see some starting here now. So hopefully it's going to survive. It doesn't do well under this pine tree, but it may eventually succeed the pine tree if it can survive. One thing that does really bug me is I planted a number of blue spruce here about 15 years ago, and they grew into really nice trees, many of them. This one was one I picked up at a nursery. It was about 2 feet high when I got it, and it was a bent little old thing, and it grew into a beautiful tree. And now the gypsy moths have eaten almost all the interior needles on it. It still has some of its outer needles, but the inner part's all brown and gray. Crown has been sort of denuded, so I don't know if it's going to live. And it was a tree I really kind of liked, just from the story of having found it at the nursery for like 15 bucks and grew into such a beautiful tree, sort of like the ugly swan story. Here's one of our speckled alders. We have a little stand of these out behind our house, and it looks like they're coming back into leaf to a degree here, so that's good. But these guys were really stripped bare by the gypsy moths.